Hi, and welcome to season 2, episode 11 of Social Anxiety Live.
Today, we are talking about something that's affecting a lot of you: social anxiety and the season. We recently polled our listeners on Instagram and Facebook and got some amazing responses. And as always, we're going to have lots of listener contributions this week to help us dive even deeper.
We're going to experience some really fascinating points, such as why winter can feel especially tough for people with social anxiety, what impact the weather and seasons have, and how our routines might change with the different seasons.
We hope this episode will shed some light on how the seasons can play a role in our mental health. So let's get started.
As always, we sent out some polls on our social media and we asked our followers whether they felt that social anxiety changes with the seasons, and we got some very interesting answers.
We did. On Instagram, 91% of you said that you do feel a change in social anxiety with the seasons, which I was quite surprised at how high of a percentage that is. And in another question, 63% of you said your social anxiety feels worse during the holidays.
I think from a personal perspective, I can see why that is. I think winter holidays, and particularly we're coming up to that season where, there's work dues, there's parties, there's lots of things going on, and the days are shorter as well. I left work today at probably 4 o'clock, and it's already pretty much dark
Yeah.
at that time. And that combination of shorter days and more social events, there's a lot going on there, and it could feel very pressurized.
Yeah, absolutely. And the results we got on Facebook were especially interesting. When we asked which season you find social anxiety hit the hardest, the majority of you said in winter. There was a few that found it hardest in summer or autumn. And we even had an 18% group who said it's a mixture of all of the seasons.
I was actually one of those. I actually thought it was a mixture. I actually don't feel it particularly prevalent in one season.
No, I would agree with that. That's why I was quite surprised at the percentage of people talking about changes in social anxiety and the fact that such a majority said winter, especially, they notice a change.
I think it's time to explore and go into further our listeners' contributions.
Yes. So our first contribution in this episode comes from Courtney, who had some really insightful thoughts on how both winter and summer can impact anxiety. She says, during the winter, you're limited by where you can go, and it gets cold and dark earlier. But in warmer weather, there's more opportunities for socializing.
That's a really good point, because winter, as I said earlier, shorter days feel like a social isolation. You're indoors earlier. There may be places, in terms of places, limited amounts that you might find comfortable during the winter months, and it can amplify feelings of loneliness. However, though, I would disagree with that point about winter maybe being more prevalent with my social anxiety, because I actually feel social anxiety across a number of
Yeah.
seasons. Because you could say in summer as well. Summer, there's lots of stuff going on, uh, like with work as well, because you can go outside more. I don't know whether I agree 100% with that particular point.
Yeah, I sort of understand her point about the limited daylight, and that might make you feel more restricted. And, I'm sure we both experienced that. You were just saying today, you left work at whatever time, 4 o'clock, and it's already dark. I think it does sometimes affect your desire to actually go out and do things when it's cold and it's dark. I think a lot of us would rather go home. But I would agree in so far that I wouldn't say that I really experience differences in my social anxiety in a particular season. I think it's just sort of a year-round thing for me that kind of comes and goes.
Courtney does make an additional point, which I do agree with, that pleasant warm weather with longer days making socializing more feasible, and the longer daylight feels more freeing and more sort of empowering, with opportunities to meet without the same pressures. I think meeting outside makes a difference. I think the sort of combination of where you are. I'm thinking of like a pub garden, for example. Like in a pub garden, I would feel quite relaxed, although I have had social anxiety in larger situations in that particular location. But yeah, I do find there's this perception that when it's warm and it's nice weather and there's sunlight and sun is proven to give you like an uplift or makes you feel better. So I think I agree with that particular point.
Yeah, I sort of see the other side of it as well, though, because in summer, Courtney's talking about the social gatherings feel more casual and open, that there's maybe more opportunities for socializing. But then as a person with social anxiety, doesn't that mean that in summer there's potentially more social gatherings? So actually your social anxiety could be worse in summer because you're not necessarily being forced into, but those social gathering opportunities are more prevalent.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yes, definitely. I think, does this resonate with our listeners though? I think, do you find your social anxiety shifts depending upon the daylight hours? So we'll put that as a question on Spotify or your chosen platform. So it'd be interesting to hear what you think about that.
Our next contribution comes from Hannah, who shared her experience of social anxiety, particularly in January and February. She mentioned that those months are her hardest, partly because they come right after the very busy holiday season, where I suppose lots is going on. You're probably socializing a lot and very, very busy.
Yeah, there's an important point there about the post-holiday period, because there's potentially a lot going on during the holidays with family, with friends, with work colleagues. It can be socially exhausting. And we've talked before about your social battery depleting as a result of these social events. And there is a pressure, I think, still to be social during the holidays. The expectation is you go and do this, you go and do that, you go to spend the holidays with this particular group of people or that particular group of people. And, there's a pull from different groups. And I think people underestimate sometimes how much it takes out of you being pulled in different directions.
Yeah, and I suppose it's almost for some people one extreme to another, possibly over the holiday season, you're non-stop, constantly socializing. As you said, that's going to affect your social battery. And it sort of goes from that to almost nothing for some people. And that can be a really hard adjustment.
It's not she, I should say she. She talks about seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, and that actually came in through a couple of other contributions. Seasonal affective disorder, as I understand it, is particularly prevalent at this time of year. The combination of it being cold, possibly being lonely or being on your own, or it's how the weather and the seasons affect you in combination probably with your work or whatever you're doing. And I think I always used to find that if I had an extended period off work, like summer holidays, for example, I used to find that quite tough going because it was a lot of time off work, because you're on the go all the time in teaching, and you've got that time where you're not teaching and you're not going really quickly or going at a particular pace. But now I feel better with it now.
Yeah, and I think, don't know if you've had that experience where you almost feel guilty for sort of complaining because, other people would think, oh, you've got 6 weeks off, that's amazing. But as you said, I think it's a really hard adjustment when you're so used to being so busy and constantly kind of on the go and it all just stops.
I think Christmas for me, the festive season, is a bit of a dilemma for me because, I like the lights, I like decorations, I like all of that sort of stuff, and it looks visually quite nice. And I like a nice little walk around Christmas markets and things like that. But Christmas does feel a bit strange for me sometimes, because if I am spending Christmas by myself, which I have done recently, the actual day itself I enjoy because I know what I'm doing. I've got my stuff in. I know I've got everything to cook. I've got my sort of things I want to do. But it does bring home the point for me sometimes that I'm on my own. And it's a contradiction in terms because I live by myself, I do a lot of things by myself, and I absolutely love it. But Christmas, I can't put my finger on it sometimes, in that it sort of brings this realization that, you've got other people sometimes doing their social stuff. And even though I sometimes my preferred option is to be on my own.
Yeah.
It just brings home that maybe I should be doing something else. And I don't know, it feels a bit odd trying to explain that.
Yeah, well, I suppose that comes back to the point about the fact that it could be obviously an aspect of social anxiety around the holiday seasons. But, things like poor sleep or stress or just the stress of the expectations of holidays can also really overwhelm people. And that's a really good point that you've just made.
I think the point from Hannah is very, very valid in that it's important for us not to get overwhelmed, regardless of whatever season it is. And we need to, as we've said numerous times, is to put your sort of self-care as high up on the list, if not actually at the top of the list, with things that you can do. Even going out for a walk during the cold, if it is cold, getting out earlier during the day is beneficial. But I think that crossover between holidays and restarting your routines is important to manage that in your way rather than being influenced by other people. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think as you said, it comes back to there will be expectations around, holidays, what people expect you to do, what people want you to do, and there can be pressures around the holiday season. But as you said, it's about thinking about yourself. What's going to make you happy, and it might not be necessarily what people expect you to do, but you have to put your self-care first, and that's a great point.
Moving on to an anonymous contribution, they shared how the dark mornings and the evenings have a big impact upon their mood, which I think links to social anxiety. They actually use a seasonal affective disorder light within their house.
Oh, I've never heard of that. Do you know much about that? Or?
I've seen something where, and I'm hoping this is the same thing, where, in the mornings, you have your alarm. We know that light from a mobile phone, particularly at night, we shouldn't have too much of that. But this seasonal affective disorder light in the morning creates a sunrise effect, so that when the alarm goes off, it's not great. It's not literally full on light in your face and it disorientates you. It sort of gradually increases as a sunrise would happen.
Oh, I see. So it sort of mimics the sunlight. So I suppose maybe that could in turn affect your mood with waking up in the morning.
Yeah, and I think that has a direct impact on your social anxiety, because if you're feeling down or sluggish in the morning, then anything you can do to change that can only be beneficial.
Absolutely. I'd be very interested to know if anyone listening has tried any sort of light therapy or anything because that is the first time I've actually heard of that. So that was really interesting for me.
Another anonymous contribution talks about family and social gatherings, and they talked about how their social anxiety gets worse in winter because of this very issue. And they come to the point where they said they often make excuses to avoid seeing people, and they end up overthinking everything.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you think about, us getting into winter now, moving towards Christmas, it is really common, isn't it? If you work, your workplace will want to do a Christmas meal and a Christmas night out. Your friends will want to meet up before Christmas. Your family, if you're in a relationship, you've got two families to think about. There's so many aspects to the social part of winter and Christmas and all those sort of things. I can completely understand how that could be very overwhelming and create those feelings of anxiety because you sort of feel this pressure a lot of the time. I think, well, yeah, I have to do that and I should do that. And it would be really bad if I said no to meeting up with these people at Christmas. I'll seem like I'm really unfriendly. And, there is a bit of pressure around it. So yeah, I can understand sort of those struggles around those family and social gatherings.
It's interesting how this person mentions overthinking, and actually one of our most popular episodes is when we did our two-parter on overthinking, and that seems quite such a long time ago we did that. And I think it's important to note that how much overthinking is a very familiar feeling for people with social anxiety. I mean, I experience it daily.
Yeah.
And again, it's a combination of your overthinking plus seasonal changes or even daily changes in terms of the weather and what it's like out there. There's potential for these, these overthinking thoughts to creep in, especially when these things come up.
Yeah.
And I still think there's a great difficulty for people with social anxiety to say no.
Yeah.
I don't want to go, or I'm not going to it. Because the overthinking kicks in with, you think, well, how are those people going to perceive me if I say I'm not going? Because I'm not ill.
Yeah.
I'm not ill. I haven't got something else to do. I probably just want to stay at home.
Yeah.
And have time to myself. But I think that's still not fully understood. Is that the right way of putting it, do you think?
No, I would agree. And I think if we're linking it to seasons as well, and we are thinking, for example, about Christmas, as you said, it's sort of, I feel like the pressure of not saying no is almost worse around those events and those times, because I think society sees, I know I keep going on about Christmas, and I understand not everyone celebrates Christmas, but just as an example, there is this sort of expectation in society, the way that they show us Christmas in adverts and on the TV is like, you're with lots of people, you're with your family, you're being really social. They don't really show it as a time when you might just be on your own, or you might just be sort of looking after your mental health. It's always very much like you are with your family, you're out, you're with friends, you're busy, and that's not how Christmas is for everyone.
I think there's that perception that if you are on your own, people feel sorry for you, or people think it's a bit sad that you're on your own, or you haven't got anyone there. Whilst actually,
you might just want to say no.
Yeah, and I think if you want to spend Christmas by yourself, then we shouldn't be afraid to say that, because I had COVID one year and I spent Christmas on my own, and I thought it was okay. I got someone else got my food in, and I cooked, and I watched pretty much whatever telly I wanted to, and it was nice. It was okay. But I think if you don't want to go to all these social events, or there's something you don't want to go to, you should just say no. No, thank you. I'm going to be spending this time doing this other stuff or something else.
Yeah, but that takes practice, and that takes, time. As you said, it's not always easy to say no.
I think this contributor makes a lovely point as well about, it's dark, but they're craving the cold, crisp, sunshiny days. And that makes me think, thinking of a morning where, it's frosty and it's cold and it might have been snowing. I mean, it has been in the country, some parts of the country this week. And I think, some people won't go out in that sort of weather because it is cold, but you dress appropriately for it. And I think there's a lot to be said for getting out regardless of the weather. And, this person, I think, is longing for that brightness to help keep them grounded and less anxious. So I think there's something to be said there about the effect of light, as you said in the previous contribution, of being something that helps with that particular person and their anxiety. So another contribution that came in, and I really like this contribution because this contribution comes from Max, who identifies as neurodivergent, and they share some really interesting insights on the clocks changing, affecting the anxiety. And I hadn't really thought about the clocks because actually the clocks changing represent a changing routine. And as we know, changes in routine do affect neurodivergent individuals more than neurotypical people. And he goes on to say that everything in his daily routine, from the morning commute to the evening wind down, feels different, and it creates a sense of disorientation.
Yeah, no, I thought that was such an interesting point as well, because it's not something I've ever thought of. I think quite often the clock changes actually pass me by a little bit. But, Max pointed out how routines and those sensory experiences like temperature changes actually have a really big impact on how they feel. For instance, constantly adjusting between cold outdoors or heated indoors, that can affect sensory, create sensory overload, which could then affect your anxiety.
Linked into that, there's the notion of interoception. Now, interoception is to do with when you recognise changes in your body when you need something. So, like today, when I walked to the train station today, I saw someone who I'm assuming had been out jogging, and they were in like a vest and a pair of shorts. And I did think that person must be freezing cold.
Yeah.
But I actually found out they weren't going on for a jog. They were just going. That's what they were. That's what they were walking in during the days. That interoception, the notion of that, is when sometimes you don't recognise your body as needing, the warm clothes, or you're needing food and drink and whatever during particular types of weather, and that links to what Max said about sensory overload, and it can make routine tasks feel challenging. And I think I resonate quite a lot for that. And it's not just through social interactions that I find it challenging. It's like everyday stuff. I mean, I mentioned to you before we came in, I'm embarrassed to say that, there's washing up in the sink, there's cups sitting around, there's other bits that, I would probably have put away, but I feel absolutely shattered at the moment. And I don't know whether that's because it's cold. I don't think it's anxiety linked,
No.
but I do feel, quite overwhelmed with stuff, everyday stuff. Maybe that's exacerbated by the colder weather we have at the moment.
Yeah, well, and I think that links to another point made by Matt, where he says when you're on high alert due to your sensory overload, then facing tasks or large groups can feel especially draining.
Yes, that's a really important point, because sensory overload leads to anxiety, and sensory overload and anxiety leads to dysregulation. And if you are dysregulated because of your social anxiety, I've had occasions where I've become completely overwhelmed by social situations, and the way that I show my dysregulation isn't through a meltdown. It's more through I can feel something, but I can't put my finger on what it is. But I completely agree with everything that Max said. And it's important to note that from a neurodivergent perspective, social anxiety is a big thing within a lot of the the neurotypes that we have.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Max, for your contribution. Our next contribution, and I think our final contribution for this episode, is from Gemma.
Let's give a special shout out to Gemma, because we know Gemma from previous work.
We do. Thank you, Gemma. So Gemma shared her thoughts on the extreme seasons of winter and summer, which she says bring about high pressure events that feel more formal or structured. And I think I sort of alluded to that earlier in the episode. Talking around winter, you're thinking about things like Christmas maybe, and then summer, because the weather's really good, you're going to have a lot more people wanting to go out, go into the city or go to pubs and go in the pub gardens. And actually those sorts of events are going to be more common, more prevalent. They're probably going to pop up more. So that's a good point about the sort of extremes of those seasons.
Sometimes on a positive slant, if you've decided to go to those sort of big social events in those particular seasons, it does push us outside our comfort zones with the unfamiliar groups and expectations. And I think there is a point to be had in that if you do push yourself to go to those things, and then you have the confidence to speak to new people, you are going to find out other things. You're going to have new experiences. But on the other hand, I also appreciate how that's terrifying.
Oh yeah, completely. I can see both sides of it. It's a scary thing to do, and it can be very overwhelming. But I've also had that experience where I have pushed myself out of my comfort zone, and afterwards I've really felt like a sense of achievement, and it could have been something really tiny. I could have gone to an event and spoken to like one person for 2 minutes, but I'll go home and think, wow, oh, that was really good. I'm so proud of myself for doing that, because that wasn't easy.
Contributions we've had today have been really enlightening. There've been a real range of experiences, and I'd like to, on behalf of the Suppose, to say thank you to everybody who shared their thoughts, either through contacting us or through responding to our polls.
Yes, and as always, we're always welcome contributions for our episode, or if you have any questions, please send them in to us.
And as always, if you want to provide feedback or comments or suggestions for future episodes, please contact us at socialanxietylife2023@gmail.com.
Thank you so much for listening.
Stay safe, take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Bye.